16-year-old Beatrice Worthington had always been astonishingly easy to overlook. With a slight frame that barely grazed 5 feet 3 inches, mousy brown hair that hung limply around her delicate shoulders, and thick-rimmed glasses that seemed far too large for her face, she moved through the chaotic hallways of Westbridge High School like a phantom. Her uniform always fit a little too loosely, hanging off her thin shoulders, and she had a quiet habit of hunching forward, as if perpetually trying to disappear into herself. She had transferred to Westbridge just 3 months ago, her family uprooted across the country by her father's job relocation. Starting junior year at a new school was challenging enough for anyone, but Beatrice's natural, ingrained shyness made it nearly impossible for her to connect with a single soul. She spent her lunches alone, her free periods tucked away in the quiet solace of the library, and her walks between classes with her eyes fixed firmly on the ground, a silent plea for invisibility. What none of her classmates, not even her cruelest tormentors, knew was that Beatrice held a secret, a profound strength hidden beneath her meek exterior. She had spent the last 8 years rigorously training in mixed martial arts. Her father, a former military man with a steely resolve, had enrolled her in classes when she was just 8 years old, after a particularly brutal bullying incident at her old elementary school. "Never again," he had told her, his voice firm with protective love. "Never again will you be helpless." Under the strict, unwavering guidance of Master Rodriguez, a former UFC fighter whose weathered face told stories of countless battles, Beatrice had quietly blossomed into a formidable athlete. Her lean frame, which fooled so many, hid muscles capable of delivering devastating strikes, and her quiet demeanor masked the sharp, strategic mind of a true fighter. She had won 3 regional championships in her age group, each victory a testament to her hidden power. But Master Rodriguez had taught her far more than just technique. "True strength," he would often say, his eyes piercing through her shy facade, "is knowing when not to fight." Beatrice carried this profound philosophy with her, choosing peace over conflict, even when it meant enduring soul-crushing humiliation. She had promised her parents, her voice earnest, that she would focus solely on her studies and meticulously avoid any trouble at her new school. Fighting, even in righteous self-defense, seemed like a betrayal of that sacred promise, a step back into a past they desperately hoped to leave behind. She longed to be normal, to make friends through shared interests rather than hard-won, often violent, respect. This quiet resolve, born of love and a yearning for a fresh start, ironically made her the perfect, unsuspecting target. The main source of her torment came in the form of 3 students who had marked her as their primary target within her very first week at Westbridge. The ringleader was Jessica Manning, a tall, athletic 17-year-old with platinum blonde hair and the kind of unshakable confidence that came from never being challenged. As captain of the volleyball team and daughter of the school board president, Jessica wielded considerable social power, her sharp tongue honed from years of knowing that words could cut deeper than any blade. Her primary lieutenant was Marcus Thompson, a hulking 18-year-old who had been held back a year and used his imposing size to intimidate anyone who crossed his path. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches with broad shoulders earned from countless hours in the weight room, Marcus reveled in making others feel small, his cruel laugh echoing through the hallways whenever he spotted potential prey. The third member of their insidious trio was Samantha Pike, a petite redhead whose innocent appearance masked a truly vicious streak. She was Jessica's best friend and had perfected the art of psychological warfare through insidious social media posts and whispered rumors. Where Jessica was openly cruel and Marcus physically intimidating, Samantha worked in the shadows, spreading lies and orchestrating humiliation from behind the scenes. Together, they had turned Beatrice's daily existence into a nightmarish gauntlet of small cruelties and public embarrassments. It started subtly. Accidental shoulder bumps in the hallway that sent her books scattering across the floor. Then came the snide comments about her ill-fitting clothes, her quiet demeanor, her obvious status as an outsider. They would sit behind her in classes, making just enough noise to distract her while expertly staying below the teacher's radar. The faculty at Westbridge High seemed either oblivious or worse, indifferent to the systematic harassment. Mrs. Peterson, Beatrice's English teacher, was too focused on her lesson plans to notice the paper balls being lobbed at the back of her students' head. Coach Williams was too busy managing his football stars to care about what happened to quiet girls in the hallways. Even Mr. Harrison, the principal, seemed more concerned with maintaining the school's pristine reputation than protecting vulnerable students. The other students fell into two disheartening categories: those who actively participated in the mockery, their laughter fueling the torment, and those who simply looked the other way, pretending nothing was happening. Beatrice quickly learned that standing up for someone being bullied was social suicide at Westbridge. It was far easier to pretend nothing was happening than to risk becoming the next target. Each morning, Beatrice would wake with a cold knot in her stomach, dreading the 8 hours of humiliation that awaited her. She would pack her lunch with meticulous care, choosing foods that wouldn't make a mess if, or rather when, they were knocked over. She planned her routes through the school to painstakingly avoid the spots where Jessica's group typically gathered. She developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when trouble was approaching, ducking into bathrooms or empty classrooms to avoid confrontation. "Why don't you just fight back?" The voice in her head sounded exactly like Master Rodriguez. She could picture his weathered face, scarred from years of competition, and the way his eyes would narrow when he taught her about controlling distance and timing. She remembered the thrilling feel of the heavy bag under her gloves, the pure satisfaction of a perfectly executed combination, the rush of adrenaline after sparring sessions. But she also remembered her mother's tears, the hopeful vulnerability in her voice when she explained why they were moving. "This is our chance for a fresh start, sweetheart. Promise me you'll try to fit in this time. No more fighting. No more trouble." Her parents had been horrified when they learned about her championship fights, worried that their quiet daughter was becoming too aggressive, too willing to resort to violence. They simply wanted her to be normal, to make friends through shared interests rather than hard-won, often violent, respect. The pattern of abuse escalated gradually. What started as verbal taunts evolved into increasingly physical harassment. Jessica would accidentally spill drinks near Beatrice's locker, forcing her to navigate sticky puddles of soda. Marcus would physically block doorways, his immense frame looming over her, making her ask permission to pass while he leered down at her. Samantha, the shadow weaver, would take photos of Beatrice in her most vulnerable moments and cruelly share them in group chats with vicious captions. The cafeteria became a particular source of dread. Beatrice had taken to sitting at a corner table near the windows, hoping the natural light might make her feel less isolated. She would eat quickly, mechanically, her focus solely on finishing her meal and escaping before the predators noticed her presence. But Jessica's group had made it their mission to seek her out, turning lunch into a daily performance of humiliation. "Look who's eating alone again," Jessica would announce loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Don't you have any friends to sit with, Beatrice? Oh wait, I forgot. Nobody actually likes you." Marcus would contribute his own crude observations. "Maybe if you weren't so weird, people would want to be around you. Have you tried not being such a freak?" Samantha's attacks were more subtle but equally devastating. "I heard she talks to herself in the bathroom, like full conversations. It's honestly kind of sad." Through it all, Beatrice would keep her eyes on her food, chewing slowly, breathing deeply, reminding herself that this was temporary. In 2 years, she would graduate and leave this place forever. She could endure anything for 2 years. "But should you have to?" Master Rodriguez's voice echoed in her mind again, challenging her acceptance of the situation. She could feel her muscle memory responding to the stress, her body naturally shifting into a more balanced stance even while sitting. Her hands would unconsciously form loose fists under the table, and she would have to consciously relax them, forcing down the growing tide of anger. This internal conflict raged within her, a quiet girl with a warrior's spirit, longing for peace yet constantly pushed to the brink. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late October. Beatrice had been having a particularly difficult morning. She had overslept and missed breakfast, forgotten her chemistry homework, and received a disappointing grade on a history test she thought she had aced. She was looking forward to lunch as a brief respite from the day's mounting disasters, a small anchor in a turbulent sea. She had packed one of her favorite meals, a turkey and avocado sandwich her father had made, complete with the special mustard they had discovered at a local deli. It was comfort food, a small, tangible connection to home and family in the hostile environment of Westbridge High. She also had a container of her mother's homemade cookies, chocolate chip with sea salt, and a thermos of the special chai tea blend her grandmother had taught her to make, each item a whisper of love from afar. Beatrice settled into her usual corner table, unpacking her lunch with the careful precision of someone who had learned to find profound joy in small, familiar rituals. The sandwich looked perfect, the cookies smelled like home, and the tea was still steaming when she unscrewed the thermos cap, releasing a fragrant cloud. For a precious moment, she allowed herself to relax, to imagine she was anywhere else but in the Westbridge cafeteria, a fleeting escape into a world where she felt safe and valued. Well, well, well. Jessica's voice cut through her momentary peace like a jagged knife, sharp and cruel. Look what the little mouse brought for lunch today. Beatrice's shoulders tensed, but she didn't look up. She had learned that eye contact was always interpreted as either a challenge or an open invitation for further harassment. Instead, she took a small bite of her sandwich, trying to project an air of calm indifference, hoping her silence might bore them into leaving. "I'm talking to you, freak." Jessica's voice had moved closer. Beatrice could see designer sneakers in her peripheral vision, expensive shoes that probably cost more than Beatrice's entire wardrobe. "Leave me alone," Beatrice said quietly, her voice barely audible, still not looking up. "I'm not bothering anyone. Not bothering anyone." Marcus's booming voice joined the chorus, dripping with contempt. "Your whole existence bothers people. You're like a walking mood killer." "Seriously," Samantha added, her voice a sickly sweet poison. "Just looking at you makes me depressed. Can't you eat somewhere else? Like maybe in a dumpster where you belong?" The nearby tables had gone quiet, the usual hum of cafeteria chatter dying down to an expectant hush. Beatrice could feel dozens of eyes on her, students pausing their own conversations to watch the unfolding show. Some looked uncomfortable, a fleeting flicker of sympathy in their gazes, but none intervened. This was entertainment, a brief, cruel diversion from the monotony of the school day. "Maybe we should help her find a better place to eat," Jessica said, her voice taking on a dangerous sweetness. "Somewhere more appropriate for someone like her." Before Beatrice could even react, Jessica had grabbed her lunch tray, lifting it high above her head. The carefully prepared sandwich, the homemade cookies, the special tea. All of it hovered in the air for a moment that seemed to stretch into an eternity, poised on the brink of destruction. "Oops," Jessica said with mock concern, and then with a casual flick of her wrist let go. The tray and its contents crashed to the floor in a spectacular, sickening mess. The thermos hit the ground with a metallic clang, sending hot tea splashing across the tiles, scalding cold concrete. The sandwich exploded on impact, avocado and turkey scattering in all directions like shrapnel. The cookies, her mother's cookies, crumbled into dozens of irreparable pieces that were immediately ground underfoot as students gathered to watch the grotesque spectacle. But Jessica wasn't finished. As Beatrice stared at the ruins of her lunch, feeling hot tears threatening to spill over, the queen bee of Westbridge High delivered her final, most venomous insult. She gathered saliva in her mouth and spat directly onto the remains of Beatrice's food, a thick, visible glob of contempt that landed squarely on what was left of the sandwich, a final, disgusting punctuation mark. The sound of her spit hitting the food was sickeningly audible in the sudden, profound silence of the cafeteria. "There," Jessica said with chilling satisfaction, her voice barely a whisper. "Now it's perfect for you." Something inside Beatrice snapped. Not broke like a fragile glass, but snapped like a rubber band stretched beyond its limits, recoiling with violent force. 8 years of training, 8 years of discipline, 8 years of learning to control her temper and meticulously choose her battles. All of it was overwhelmed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. It felt like fire in her veins, burning away the last vestiges of her fear and shyness. She stood up slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate, a predator awakening. For the first time since arriving at Westbridge, she looked Jessica directly in the eyes. The change in her posture was subtle but unmistakable. Her shoulders squared, her spine straightened with an almost audible click, and her feet automatically shifted into a balanced, ready fighting stance. The meek, invisible ghost was gone. In her place stood a warrior. "What did you just do?" Beatrice's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it carried across the silent cafeteria like the chilling hush before a storm. Jessica, caught entirely off guard by this stunning transformation, instinctively took a half-step backward. What? I didn't do anything. It was an accident." Her bravado, usually an impenetrable shield, was faltering. "You spat on my food." Beatrice's voice was still quiet, dangerously so, but something in her tone made the surrounding students instinctively create more space, a wider circle around the brewing storm. "My mother made those cookies. My father made that sandwich. My grandmother taught me to make that tea. So what?" Jessica's bravado was beginning to return, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a hint of unease she couldn't hide. "It's just food. Get over it. Just food." Beatrice stepped closer, and Jessica took another involuntary step back, bumping into the wall. "You just destroyed something that connected me to my family. You degraded something that gave me comfort, and then you spat on it like it was garbage." Marcus, sensing that his leader was losing control of the situation, stepped forward to intimidate the smaller girl, his hulking frame casting a menacing shadow. "Hey, back off, psycho. It's not that serious." Beatrice turned to look at him, and Marcus felt something cold run down his spine, a primal fear he hadn't experienced in years. The quiet, meek girl they had been tormenting for months was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Someone whose eyes held the kind of unwavering confidence that came from knowing exactly what they were capable of. "You're right," Beatrice said, her voice carrying clearly across the now packed cafeteria, every word sharp and precise. "It's not that serious. Spitting on someone's food is just Tuesday for you three, isn't it? Just another way to remind someone that they don't matter." She looked around the cafeteria, her gaze sweeping over the dozens of students who had watched her humiliation unfold without lifting a single finger. "How many of you have watched them do this to me? How many of you have seen them knock my books down, trip me in the hallways, make me feel like I don't deserve to exist in the same space as you?" The silence was deafening. Dozens of students looked away, suddenly fascinated by their own half-eaten lunches, avoiding her piercing gaze. "I've been trying to be invisible," Beatrice continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, vibrating with an unleashed power. "I thought if I just kept my head down, didn't cause trouble, eventually you'd get bored and move on to someone else. I told myself that violence wasn't the answer, that there had to be a better way." She looked back at Jessica, who was now standing with her mouth slightly open, clearly not expecting this level of articulation or defiance from her usual victim. "But you know what? Sometimes violence is the answer. Sometimes it's the only language bullies understand." The transformation was complete. Now Beatrice's entire body language had changed. She moved with the fluid, effortless grace of a trained fighter, her weight balanced perfectly on the balls of her feet, her hands relaxed but undeniably ready. Students who had never paid attention to her before suddenly found themselves studying her movements, recognizing something predatory and utterly formidable in the way she carried herself. "You want to know what's not serious?" Beatrice asked, taking another deliberate step toward Jessica, whose face was now etched with a dawning fear. "What's not serious is that I could have ended this on my first day here. What's not serious is that I've been holding back because I thought it made me a better person." Jessica finally found her voice, a strained, high-pitched sound. "You're crazy. You can't just threaten people. I'm going to report you to the principal." "Report me for what?" Beatrice's smile was cold and sharp, a glint of steel. "Standing up. Using my voice. I haven't touched you." Yet the word touched hung in the air like a promise and a chilling threat. Marcus, desperate to reassert his dominance, lunged forward, reaching to grab Beatrice's shoulder. "That's enough, you little—" He never finished the sentence. Beatrice's response was so breathtakingly fast that most observers missed it entirely. She pivoted on her left foot, used Marcus's forward momentum against him, and executed a perfect hip toss that sent all 200 pounds of him crashing to the cafeteria floor. The sound of his body hitting the tiles echoed like a gunshot, loud and jarring in the stunned silence. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and excited chatter, a collective murmur of shock and awe. Marcus lay on his back, staring at the ceiling in utter disbelief, the wind knocked out of him. He had been taken down by a girl half his size, and he couldn't even process how it had happened. "Marcus!" Samantha shrieked, rushing to check on her fallen friend. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Jessica was backing away now, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pure disbelief. "You're insane. You just assaulted him. You're going to get expelled." "Self-defense," Beatrice said calmly, not even breathing hard, her voice a stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. "He grabbed me first. Everyone saw it." She looked around the cafeteria again, her gaze unwavering, and this time several students nodded in agreement, their silence confirming her truth. The dynamic had shifted completely. Where moments before she had been the helpless victim, now she was clearly, undeniably in control. Marcus struggled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and impotent rage. "You little bitch," he snarled. "I'm going to destroy you." He lunged forward with all the subtlety of an angry bull, throwing a wild haymaker that would have done serious damage if it had connected. But Beatrice wasn't there when his fist arrived. She had stepped inside his reach, ducked effortlessly under his arm, and delivered a sharp elbow to his solar plexus that doubled him over, gasping for breath. As he choked for air, she grabbed his wrist and twisted it into a painful compliance hold that forced him to his knees. The technique was perfect, painful enough to control him completely, but not severe enough to cause permanent damage. "I don't want to hurt you," she said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make him wince, "but I will if you keep this up." "Let him go," Jessica screamed, her voice bordering on a shriek. "Someone call security." But nobody moved to help. The same students who had watched Beatrice's humiliation with detached interest were now completely absorbed in her stunning demonstration of power. Some were recording with their phones, capturing every moment of the dramatic reversal. Beatrice looked at Jessica with something that might have been pity, a flicker of an emotion she hadn't known she possessed for her tormentor. 3 months, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense tone. For 3 months, you've made my life miserable. You've made me dread coming to school. Made me question my worth as a human being. Made me think there was something fundamentally wrong with me. She released Marcus's wrist and stood up, smoothing down her uniform, her posture radiating an untouchable dignity. Marcus remained on his knees, cradling his injured wrist and looking up at her with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. "But there's nothing wrong with me," Beatrice continued, her voice resonating with a quiet power that commanded the attention of the entire cafeteria. "The problem is that you're bullies. You're cowards who need to hurt other people to feel powerful. And the reason you picked me is because you thought I was weak." Jessica's face was pale now, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Look, maybe we got carried away," she stammered, attempting a desperate plea. "Maybe we can just forget this whole thing." "No," Beatrice's voice cut through the attempt at appeasement like a blade. "We can't forget it. Because you didn't just hurt me. You hurt everyone who's ever been in my position. Every quiet kid, every outsider, every person who just wants to get through the day without being reminded that they don't fit in." She stepped closer to Jessica, who instinctively moved backward until she hit the wall. "You want to know what I learned in the years before I came here? I learned that there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who use their strength to protect others, and those who use it to hurt them." "I'm sorry," Jessica whispered, and for the first time, she seemed to genuinely mean it, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm really sorry. We'll leave you alone. I promise." "It's too late for that," Beatrice said, but her voice was gentler now, the raw fury replaced by a somber understanding. "The damage is done. But maybe it's not too late for you to learn something. She looked around the cafeteria one more time, addressing the stunned crowd that had gathered. This is what happens when you push someone too far. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I didn't want to fight, but you didn't give me a choice. Her gaze settled on a group of underclassmen who had been frequent targets of Jessica's group. And for everyone who's been where I was, remember this. You don't have to accept being treated like garbage. You don't have to smile and take it. You have the right to defend yourself, to demand respect, to take up space in this world. She turned back to Jessica one last time. I'm not going to hunt you down or make your life miserable. I'm not going to become what you were to me. But if you ever, and I mean ever, mess with me or anyone else the way you've been doing, you'll discover that what you saw today was me being gentle. The threat was delivered in the same quiet, controlled tone she had used throughout the confrontation, but its impact was unmistakable, sending a shiver through the onlookers. Jessica nodded rapidly, tears streaming down her face. Samantha helped Marcus to his feet, both of them looking like they had seen a ghost. The hulking teenager who had spent months intimidating smaller students now couldn't make eye contact with a girl who had effortlessly put him on the ground. "Clean up my lunch," Beatrice said, gesturing to the messy floor. "All of it." Without a word of protest, all three of them dropped to their knees and began picking up the scattered food, wiping up the spilled tea, gathering the broken pieces of the thermos. The same hands that had destroyed her meal now worked frantically to undo the damage, though everyone knew it was purely symbolic. As they cleaned, Beatrice became aware of the whispers spreading through the cafeteria. Students were looking at her with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Some seemed frightened, but others, particularly those who had been victims themselves, looked at her with something approaching hero worship. "Holy crap," she heard someone whisper. "Did you see how fast she moved? Where did she learn to fight like that? I heard she's been taking karate or something." She made Marcus look like a little kid. I can't believe Jessica was actually crying. The news of the cafeteria confrontation spread through Westbridge High like wildfire. By the end of the day, the story had been told and retold dozens of times, each version adding new details or embellishments. Social media exploded with videos and commentary, turning Beatrice from an invisible outsider to an overnight legend. The aftermath was swift and dramatic. Principal Harrison called Beatrice to his office, where she calmly explained the situation, providing witnesses and context for her actions. The security footage confirmed her account. She had been defending herself against harassment and assault. When Marcus's parents threatened to press charges, the video evidence made it devastatingly clear that their son had been the aggressor. More importantly, other students, emboldened by Beatrice's courage, began coming forward with their own stories of harassment from Jessica's group. The investigation revealed a pattern of systematic bullying that had been ignored for years. Jessica was suspended for a week and required to attend anger management counseling. Marcus was removed from the football team and faced his own suspension. Samantha was banned from social media at school and required to perform community service. But the real profound change was in the social dynamics of the school itself. Beatrice found herself approached by students who had never spoken to her before, some seeking advice, others tentatively offering friendship, still others simply wanting to express their admiration for her courage. "I wish I had your guts," said a freshman named Ashley, who had been one of Jessica's frequent targets. "I've been dealing with her crap for 2 years and I never knew what to do about it." "You don't need to fight," Beatrice told her gently, her voice now filled with a quiet wisdom. "But you do need to stand up for yourself, find your voice, set boundaries, and don't let anyone convince you that you deserve to be treated badly." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some students seemed to expect Beatrice to become the new queen bee, to use her newfound status to dominate others the way Jessica had. Others were simply afraid of her, giving her a wide berth as if she might explode at any moment. But Beatrice had no interest in becoming what she had defeated. She used her influence not for power, but for purpose. She actively worked to create a safe space for other outsiders, forming a lunch group for students who didn't fit into the traditional social hierarchies. She worked tirelessly with the administration to establish better anti-bullying policies and reporting systems, ensuring that no other student would have to endure the quiet hell she had survived. Jessica, for her part, seemed genuinely changed by the experience. The public humiliation of being so utterly and effortlessly defeated had forced her to confront the ugly reality of her own behavior. She approached Beatrice privately a few weeks later, offering a sincere apology that went far beyond her earlier desperate attempts to avoid consequences. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice small and uncertain, her usual sharp edges blunted by remorse. "I know I hurt you, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix that. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be scared, to have people looking at you like you're nothing." Beatrice studied her former tormentor, seeing for the first time someone who looked genuinely remorseful rather than simply caught. "I appreciate the apology," she said finally, "and I hope you've learned something from this. But more than that, I hope you use what you've learned to be better, not just to me but to everyone." Jessica nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "I will. I promise I will." 6 months later, Beatrice had settled into her new role as one of the most respected students at Westbridge High. She had joined the school's martial arts club, where she helped train other students in self-defense, her quiet guidance inspiring many. She had made genuine friends among the formerly invisible students who had found their voices after watching her powerful example. But perhaps most importantly, she had found peace with her own power. The girl who had once hidden her strength out of fear of being judged had learned that there was honor in being strong, as long as that strength was used wisely, for protection and empowerment. Standing in the same cafeteria where her transformation had begun, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about Master Rodriguez's teachings, about the crucial difference between being a warrior and being a bully, about the profound responsibility that came with the ability to hurt others. True strength isn't about never fighting, she realized, a profound truth settling in her heart. It's about fighting for the right reasons in the right way at the right time. She had learned that sometimes the greatest act of courage wasn't avoiding conflict, but standing up when standing up mattered. She had discovered that her gentleness was not weakness but a conscious choice, and that choice had far more power when it was backed by the option to be otherwise. The quiet girl who had once been afraid of her own shadow had become someone who cast shadows of her own, not to hide others in darkness, but to provide shelter and protection for those who needed it. She had learned that being strong didn't mean being cruel, and that true victory wasn't about defeating your enemies, but about refusing to become them. As she watched the diverse group of students at her lunch table, former outcasts who had found their place, former victims who had found their voices, even former enemies who had found a path to redemption, Beatrice smiled. This was what winning looked like. Not the moment of physical triumph, but the lasting change that came after. Not the fear in her bully's eyes, but the confidence in her friends' postures. Not the power to hurt, but the wisdom to heal. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning, a living legacy of empowerment for all to witness.